Hey guys, Chris from Profitable Guidance here. This is more of a Q&A that I do with some of my coaching clients, and I wanted to share a response that I actually give to a member of our community, the PG community, and how we kind of work through the psychology and the mindset and all the strategic kind of maneuvering that we can actually do during the day-to-day in order to capitalize on opportunities as they come and as they present themselves. So today's question is, what to focus on when things are completely falling apart? That's a great question. It's a very broad question. It doesn't really define what's specifically falling apart, and each to their own, I suppose. But this is just a way to kind of think through these parameters and how to apply it. Now, there's two ways of thinking, and from a really high level, there's just kind of ways that I love to think through, particularly business and the business economics. And I'm a huge advocate for the proponent of consumer psychology and how behavioral thinking, behavioral decision making actually plays a part in how you build out a business. And that's not to say just for consumers and who you're selling the product to, but this comes down to your team, your staff, and how you've actually built your business, particularly with your respective business owners or your business partners, and how you've chosen them, what psychology that they have, what they possess, and what their strengths and skill sets are. But anyway, scatterbrain aside, I want to explain to you how I think and how I've assisted and almost even learnt this way of thinking through high net wealth clients and people who are mentors in my network, and how they kind of think through different problems and how they actually apply strategies and the methods of thinking. So back to the question, what to focus on when things are falling apart, is to actually go back to first principles thinking. Now, first principles thinking in terms of business sense, from a sense of economics, there's a type of economics called Austrian economics, and Austrian economics basically intertwines behavioral consumer psychology, or the psychology of the population, into ways of tweaking things in the most economically viable ways, but with the reduced cost in terms of the overall total cost of implementing a change. And what does that mean? It's like everyone tries to think of what is 20% of the effort that I can do today that will produce 80% of the results. And the same thing of like a larger scale thinking of what is the smallest change that we can do, but actually the ability to try to change the way, or try to allow for consumer psychology or the psychology of a population, I call it the collective kind of consciousness, and how to actually persuade them to make decisions based on what changes that have been implemented, and in what sense, and how did it actually make sense to us. Is to actually give an example of, for example, let's say a government is trying to choose whether or not to how to solve a problem of traffic congestion. And let's say there was 2 lanes that go into a city, and there's a lot of complaints from the public and traffic congestion and reducing the efficiency of business operations and the markets and the shopping precinct and that local economy of that city, but then also the other factors of pollution and just general traffic congestion, and also foot traffic congestion in populous cities. So the way Austrian economics would work was, if you ask that question to someone and say, how would you reduce the congestion of the people in the city, and how to reduce the congestion of the people on the roads, the most popular type of thinking, or the most common thinking, would be the most logical would be to increase the number of lanes, right? There was 2 lanes that go into the city, and that will therefore reduce the congestion on the road and allow people to go into the city. Another way of thinking is to actually think about why people go into the city. Is it for work? Is it for play? Is it for entertainment? Is it the shop? And to change the way people think, or like what would result in their decision to actually get in their car and drive to the city? What would make them use public transport without forcing them to create to use public transport? And that would be ways to, for example, reduce the ability to park in that city, to reduce the amount of parking spaces, to reduce or to increase the cost of parking. Excuse me. Oh, bless me. To reduce the amount of parking spaces, to increase the cost of parking, to deter people from coming into the city, to allow to make people carpool into the city. Obviously, people with different price sensitivity would be persuaded with different ways of thinking that through, and whether to actually take public transport, to carpool, etc. So that's Austrian economics, and I love it because it actually blends in psychology and behavioral thinking into how to actually make decisions and how to actually implement those. So then coming back to what to focus on when things are falling apart is the whole concept of the psychology. Like, what is the smallest amount of action that you can take to have the biggest amount of change? And I'm giving you that thinking, that logic, that way of thinking is from a business standpoint, which, assuming when things fall apart, is when things are falling apart, like what are things that you can't control? You can't control COVID right now. You can't control the lockdowns. You can't control the decisions made by local government authorities and how that impacts your business. But what are small things that you can implement right now that will allow you to have the largest amount of change, but also thinking through the psychology of what people and what decisions are they making? And what does everyone want? Like, what is the psychology of the general public? Is that there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and to actually hedge with some certainty will actually balance that out. Going back to the 4 psychological human needs that will beg, borrow, steal, cheat, whatever we need to lie to get what we need in terms of that. And we've been doing this since from childhood all the way up to adulthood. And a lot of this thinking actually comes along with us, but we'll have 4 needs that will need to be met. It's a need for certainty, a need for uncertainty, a need for significance, and a need for love and connection. And hence, social media comes into that connection aspect, but then lacks a lot of that love because there's a lot of hate blending in. Need for significance makes you feel unworthy, especially on social media, when you see someone else who's successful, achieving new heights, achieving great things, and meanwhile we're not achieving those things in that success spectrum with what kind of allows someone to actually deem themselves to be successful or not. And then there's uncertainty, which is redefined as just variety or surprises, so to speak. And then there's the need for certainty, which is a need for just known outcomes, just some known things, like what am I going to have for dinner tonight? Like what time will that person will be home? What will I be paid next month? Will I have a job next month? Just some certainty. And it kind of just hedges that risk of everyone wants that. Like that's just the basic core human psychological need. Like we need that certainty, and we also need a blended mix of uncertainty and surprises. And so we can actually construct a day, construct our focus around those parameters, and not allow our mind or our actions, our subconscious mind, to actually derive those psychological needs through toxic behaviors. I'm hoping I'm making sense in that regard. So how to bring that in all into a blended kind of answer is what to focus on when things are falling apart. Think more basic core human behavioral needs. How do people act? What do people need right now? What do people actually seek? What are their pains and what their problems are? What are their desires? And when you really bring that inwards, we all have those parameters governing our life. So what to focus on is to focus on a holistic, balanced approach. Try to get some certainty into your day and try to get some surprises and some, things that you can actually have that you don't know, like whether it be with exercise and routines. Put in some exercises into a hat and pull it out of the hat. Get yourself some uncertainty so you don't gamble and you don't take an unnecessary risk. It can just be anything, but just an example of what to focus on is to just peel back to those emotional core human psychological needs, and that will provide you with some certainty around your day because you don't allow for that to happen. So that were the core needs that we all will get. And I know a lot of stable people who have great jobs and great businesses and strong family values and all that kind of thing, and they just go rogue occasionally, and because they're lacking in craving that uncertainty. Uncertainty by the way of surprises and something that it's like it comes out of the blue. It's something that it's unexpected. They don't know the outcome, and that can be really self-sabotaging sometimes. So what to focus on that's my recommendation, is to really peel it back to the core human psychological needs and blend that into buckets that we can control, again, from a higher level, from a different level, which is, again, you're going to those psychological needs, but then the two bonus ones, the ones that have the most XP points, the ones that allow for us to kind of succeed and grow and to contribute, is, again, those two words, growth and contribution. So how do we blend that into our day? We've got to make sure our day, like what do we all want? What's our basket of goods that we're going down this shopping center of life of, there's houses here and there's family over here, and then there's businesses and things that we want to acquire or to make or create. There are the respect of people around us. Like what are certain things that we crave and need that we've kind of grown up with lack around, whether that's lacking or feeling love deprived because we either had parents that played the hard love kind of card, and kind of like made, like we sought refuge with education, we sought refuge with our friends, to go out and party. We sought refuge through substances, through procrastination, through binging, whether it's eating, consuming food, or consuming digital media. What is it that we're kind of craving right now that we've kind of been deprived of when we're growing up? And when you think about the human the human mindset of how we kind of go about our days and how we kind of what we focus on, sometimes it's just a random number generator. Some mornings we wake up and we want to focus on our efforts on fitness and exercise, and because we feel subconsciously as we're trending, we just feel really unhealthy. We just want to have an apple. Have you ever felt like that? Like, I've been eating crap for so long, on a consistent basis. I'm just craving some healthy food. We'll auto-balance, we'll auto-correct our ways through seeking that balance. But what to really focus on when things are falling apart is just go from those core human needs, make sure that we've got some certainty in our routines, make sure that we got love and connection, whether it be just like touching base with people, whatever you define that love and connection as, whether it's on social media, if it is what it is, you can't physically, interact with others, but whatever you need to do, and even that if that's with yourself, reconnecting through journaling, whatever, and also the need for significance, and actually just reevaluate like the reason why you're here on this planet, on this floating rock, hurling through the universe right now at a very fast speed. And the fact that the fact that we're here right now, like where you're alive right now, like is that enough significance? And the lack of conscious awareness of that, and actually put some effort into cultivating that gratitude and that conscious awareness that you're actually in this body, you can move, whether you've got all your limbs intact. That's an amazing factor as well. The fact that you're alive, you're conscious right now, you're watching this video, you're watching this content, you're sharing this experience of this coaching community, and actually just be aware that you're alive. You have the opportunity to make decisions, and with consistent, persistent effort of those decisions that are aligned with where you want to go, you're going to get exactly what you want eventually. Like, it's actually going to come into your reality. That's what's really cool about this life, is that you can focus your efforts towards something you're passionate about, something you feel that's unfair. It doesn't have to be good. Sometimes through bad, beautiful things emerge. Through I'm here in Australia, and we've had like awful bushfires and then followed up by COVID. So a lot of us have been like inside for a prolonged period of time. But when we were allowed to travel, and I was driving down through our coastal areas and just seeing through all this charcoal kind of areas of just dead forest, there's all these beautiful ferns and vibrant greens emerging, and all these like dead tree trunks that were just completely blackened with soot and dark embers, and like you just had like all these green, vibrant, the most greenest things you can think of. This contrast between the two, and the beautiful thing is that like that forest fire that basically culled out every little bit of shrub, of obviously there's the bad effect of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, but I'm talking more of the what you can visually see of how life finds a way, and it just allows for new regrowth. And then sure enough, after a few weeks, months, like everything's kind of regrowing back to where it was, and it's more beautiful than ever, and it makes you appreciate after the storm, the sun comes back out. And yeah, there's things that need to address, and obviously I'm not undermining that, and I'm not undermining the environmentalist arguments that should be flowing through with that observation. But it's more so just really, really high level. After dark times comes the light, and what to focus on. Stripping back those kind of layers and blending in those psychological needs. And in turn, we're going to grow. You want to blend in growth and contribution. How can you measure growth? Whether through journaling or through, fitness and health. Can you track what your steps are? Can you track your business? Can you track your cash flow? Can you what can you track? Can you grow? Where can you grow? How many pages of a book can you read? Like, what key performance indicators can you implement? How many times did you get triggered today emotionally? How many times did you react in an adverse way, whether internally through yourself, through your own thoughts, or viciously kind of outward project any insecurities onto someone else? How can you measure that? How can you objectively measure that through a journal entry, through a bit of paper and a pen, or through someone else tracking and see how much you're growing? And don't judge it by today, there's 7, 8, 9 things that I lashed out, and tomorrow is 13, 14 things, and next day is 6, 7 things, or wow, there was so many things I've lashed out. Look at a more broader scale, and be conscious when you are. Be aware that when you're on a rampage with these things, and see what you can autocorrect, and see how you can rebalance yourself. That's how I'd recommend looking at what to focus on when things are falling apart. Go back to the core fundamentals of what our brain, what our mind will naturally do. We'll seek out those 4 aspects. Blending in growth and contribution is going to make you feel fulfilled, and blend that in through all those life buckets. Your relationship with your spouse, relationship with your kids, if you have any, relationship with yourself, with your alone time, with your meditative states, with your mindfulness states, your career, or your defined career, or your passion, your purpose, what you're kind of focusing on, what you're cultivating. Where are your buckets at? Where's your money at? Where's your net wealth at? How can you grow that? What can you do to help contribute? What's your give back? What's your contribution back into society? Where can you measure that? Hopefully I'm making sense, but what to focus on when things are falling apart? Again, strip it back to those core human needs. Like, what are your core human needs that you can control, and blend that in with your buckets and each day, and make sure you achieve balance in direct proportion to where those buckets are depleted. And again, I'll repeat that. How can you focus on the next day? So let's say it's 11 p.m. and you're working on the next day's agenda of what you want to focus on. What buckets are like depleted? Like, is your money depleted? Like, your health and nutrition depleted? Counteract that day to blend in sustainable habits, and don't try to bring that bucket back to overflowing because you're gonna remove that water from another bucket. Try to source water from natural, sustainable sources so you can fill up all those buckets, and acknowledge that all those buckets, all those different segments of life are essentially going to be depleting. Like, it's like that inflationary purchasing power that's lost. It's kind of just like, as you grow and contribute, as you grow, you're depleting those buckets, and that hedonical adaptation that gets used to that 16% of body fat that you used to be 22%, but now you're 16%. You're really proud of yourself, and now you want to get from 16 to 15 to 14, and you're not happy with that 16% anymore. You've hedonically adapted to that new state of being. That the internal thermostat has changed. It's now wanting more. It's dissatisfied with where it's at, and it wants more. So really kind of looking at life through that lens, and surrendering to the constant bucket filling activity, which is essentially just reevaluating your life on a constant basis. And in the absence of a coach, or someone who's objectively kind of giving you advice from the sidelines that isn't emotionally triggering you in a defensive or a criticizing kind of demeanor, or you receiving that as a criticism, your ability to kind of be centered and acknowledge and call out your own BS on your actions and what decisions you've been making that aren't fulfilling all those core human needs, and allowing you to grow and contribute, and then therefore filling up those buckets of life. Because fulfillment's not going to come from that. And I don't care who you are. Like, I've dealt with a lot of entrepreneurs that are actually wanted nothing more than just to make a lot of money. And then obviously when you focus your efforts on that for a prolonged period of time, eventually that comes in, because they've dealt with so much pain and turmoil, and kind of figured things out through relentless education and learning lessons. And then their bucket is full. They're overflowing in that regard. But then in turn, they've depleted two buckets that they're completely oblivious that they've depleted, whether that be a relationship or health and nutrition, or their connection with self, their need, their significance. So yeah, it's a really deep kind of question, and that's how I would answer that. Is what to focus on things falling apart is those two layers. And again, rehashing. Focus on your psychological human needs. Make sure you can construct those four needs. Get certainty, get some uncertainty, fulfill your remind yourself of your significance, and obtain that love and connection. And if you can blend in growth and blend in contribution and measure them as a key performance indicator towards the buckets of life. You can define all the buckets you like, but your faith, your spirituality, your friendships, your relationship with your spouse, your money, your career, your health and nutrition, whatever kind of categories you want to define and where they're relevant. Obviously, people without kids, you want to be able to have buckets towards that to buffer that if you do have a kid or do adopt a child, you have the ability and the resources to kind of have that lifestyle. So if something that's absent in your life right now, you're making space for it to come in. That's what, a lot of spiritual teachers and gurus talk about, but that's essentially the logic of it as well. You don't have time to exercise right now, and you physically cannot because of an injury or what have you. But how do you carve out time in your day to work on your mind, to train your mind, to actually have space in your day to go, this is what I will consciously be doing when I physically am able to. Put on your shoes, you might be in a wheelchair, you can't even walk, what have you, but get to wherever that destination is, like top of the stairs or in the hallway or whatever, and have the shoes and visually and mentally prepare for the day that you can actually physically move. Like, carve out space for that routine and work on other things that you can control. Focus on what you can control. Focus on bringing in those human needs and blend it in with your category and your buckets, and stop giving yourself the BS. Stop lying to yourself. Stop over exaggerating. Don't stop under exaggerating. Just tell yourself the truth and how it is. Seek out that honest opinion, whether you like it or not. Journal and document and formulate your own KPIs, your key performance indicators, and focus on what you can control during this time. And again, it's so broad, and I'm sorry I can't give you a specific answer, but hopefully this kind of goes out to whoever's listening to this and actually apply it to your own circumstances. So that's what I would recommend. You focus on when things are falling apart, defining things. It's like, just that's what you do if things were falling apart, is focus on the holistic collective. It allows your gratitude to be blended in because you realize all your life buckets and what you actually have. And if you do that on a daily basis and you journal about it and just give yourself a category listing of how things are moving and what things need work, it just allows you to kind of focus your efforts on what you can control and what are falling apart, what little decisions and chess pieces can you use, what things can you do on the chessboard. And in talking about the Austrian economics of increasing, parking fees in the city to reduce the congestion of the roads, metaphorically, of your own mind. What can you do? What are small changes to reduce the congestion? Not just trying to clear your head. And you see it on the movies. I was watching a movie the other day, and someone went for a drive to clear their head. I was like, that's fascinating. I haven't really done that to clear my head. I write things down. I journal. I meditate to clear my head, and actually just following the thinking, like, why am I feeling like this? Is it because of money? Is it because of what people would think, the FOPO, the fear of other people's opinions? What is it? Don't BS yourself. Like, actually try to work it out. And sure enough, sure enough for me, I don't want to use the word, but I'll probably have to in the lack of a better word, but the immature thinking, which I know where it comes from. It's just from like childhood and growing up and a lack kind of mindset and over exaggerating or procrastinating or lying or like doing what I need to fulfill those needs, but I have no ability to actually be consciously aware of what those needs are. But with such a evolved education and learning and lessons learned along the way allows that thinking to kind of evolve into something a bit more practical and beneficial that will kind of help. So I'm aware that some of it's immature, and it allows the evolved thinking to not see it as a criticism, but more as a practical focus on where I want to head towards. So hopefully this helps. I've had things fall apart multiple times, and that's how I've kind of mentally focused on what to focus on with the lack of assistance, the lack of financial support at times, and to really just allow my own mind to work things out and to just constantly just say to myself, I'll figure it out. I always have and I always will. And allows that mental space to go, figure it out. Okay, let's leave a blank Word document mentally and allow those words to come in, or allow that empty spreadsheet in your mind to allow those numbers to come in. like financially, or a narrative, a word, like, and just to kind of eliminate and purge that old story of why you haven't got what you wanted. And that's what I mean by don't BS yourself. Tell yourself the truth. You don't have what you have right now. Listen to that voice, listen to what it is, write it down in a journal, and then read it from an objective perspective, like self-coach yourself, read that story, why you don't have what you have, and ask yourself, is that true? Like, what role did I play in this part, and what thinking could I adopt to not have this repeat? Like, history repeats itself, right? Like right now we're in a global pandemic, and we had a global pandemic in 1914 or around about that, like the Spanish flu, which should be defined as the Kansas flu, that I think I read or watched somewhere on the documentary that originated from the US. The Spanish flu, Spain wasn't involved in the war, World War One, so therefore they were the first ones to admit that they had casualties from the flu, and a lot of countries were suffering the same thing. But history was repeating itself. They had masks being implemented, the backlash, the skepticism, and you don't know what's truth and what's real, but all I know is that history repeats itself. Borders were closing within a country itself. There were police enforcing, they were issuing fines, all this stuff. Like, people weren't staying where they are. There were riots. There were people. History's repeating itself. And ask yourself, what history in your personal history on a micro scale, on a macro scale, as you go through life, is going to repeat itself until you stop being oblivious to things that you're lying to yourself about. And the faster you're able to, again, lack of a better word, don't want to use the word faster, I think naturally will happen over time, over a natural kind of cycle, and with strong habits and systems in place, the ways of thinking, you're able to then you're able to play chess with yourself and not necessarily win, but just have something a bit more sustainable. So there's not one part of your mind that's winning each time. It's always objective. It's always on the sideline reviewing. You're consciously reviewing from the sideline your thinking, if that makes sense. You're not on the field. Like, again, my mind's thinking of a soccer field, and you're playing soccer. You're not on a team. You're on the sideline with oranges, and you're not going for a certain team either. You're observing, and you're appreciating the sportsmanship. You're appreciating the sport. You're seeing players foul each other, and then others you're not getting emotionally caught up and angry. You're just observing. You're just like, wow, what a beautiful game. I'm not even into soccer, and I don't know why I'm thinking that as an example, but I just want to use an example that I'm not emotionally tied to, and I'm just observing. I love basketball. If I talk about basketball, my thinking, and I would get too passionate, and I'll be using terms that people won't resonate with. But just with soccer, I've played soccer in the past, don't really play it or follow it anymore, but on the sidelines, just observe that sport, watch the two sides play, and the ego versus the higher self, or the truth, or whatever you want to define that as, and just consciously observe with the oranges, and you're just observing the game, appreciating both sides, and respecting both sides, and realizing that with both sides of your thinking, you are super powerful if you don't take a side, and you're just leveraging that side and listening and just kind of observing both sides and going, all right, there's a time and place for this ego to play its part, and there's a time and place for this high self to play its part. And obviously there's a delicate dance and the balance between the two, but your ability to focus on those aspects, focusing what you can control being the observer, but then there's other times you cannot. So that in itself is a contradiction. But what you can focus on is your strong routines of being mindful and being in a meditative state every morning, and focusing on the journal entries that you impose and implement into your routine, which allow yourself to become the observer. That's how you control what you can control. That is the metaphorical aspect of increasing the parking fees of the city to then reduce the congestion on the roads leading into it. That's how you hack your own mindset. That's your ability to be the observer without forcing yourself to be the observer. That is using the lever of your mind control center with the least amount of effort, with the biggest amount of gain. So hopefully it helped. That was what to focus on when things are falling apart. A really complicated roundabout way that in a simplified fashion is the core human needs: uncertainty, certainty, love and connection, and significance. And then blending in growth and contribution into the life buckets. Don't just focus on what's falling apart, focus on everything collectively, because that'll allow your mind to gratefully accept strong routines in terms of, you know, your mindfulness or meditative practices that you do every day, and objectively look on the sidelines of your battle of your internal thought thinking and call out the BS. Have the oranges in your hands and watch the game of the thinking from the sidelines, and just observe and just notice where you're trying to protect yourself because you're calling out the BS, because you can become that observer without forcing it, by again thinking that, going down the road of Austrian economics of behavioral thinking, the psychology, blending in the psychology with practical economics. Anyway, so hopefully that helps. Love you all, PG community or whoever's watching this. Appreciate you all, and I'll see you in the next one.